Hello, and on behalf of the Archdiocese of San Francisco, welcome to Mosaic. Today we're going to talk about youth and young people in the Catholic Church. It's a wide array of age groups, the teens, the 20-somethings, and the 30-somethings. These are obviously distinct stages of life, and in each stage there must be different levels of maturity, different degrees of ability, and distinctive problems and challenges. But to all these people at every stage, the Catholic Church poses the same questions. Are you wondering who you are and where you belong? Are you wondering why you exist? Are you puzzled as to what life is all about and how to live it well? And do you want to love and to be loved? And I'd suggest that the answers, whether you are 13 or 33, would be yes to all of these. And to those yeses, the Catholic Church responds by saying, come on, let's work together to find out how to answer all those questions successfully. Today we will talk to two of the people that help the Church in the work of communicating with these age groups, the coordinators of ministry to youth and young adults for the Archdiocese of San Francisco. From them we'll find out something about who are today's young people. What do they think? What do they want? What do they fear? How do we help them to find meaning, to build community, and to live in a deep and genuine relationship with Jesus Christ as the basis for deep and genuine relationships with themselves and with all others? Please stay with us as we talk with our youth and young adult ministers about their work. Hello and welcome to Mosaic. I want to introduce our guests today. These are employees of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. They're called coordinators of ministry to youth and young adults. Now, on my left, Amanda George. And Amanda, you are coordinator of youth and young adult ministry. And on her left, Chris Mariano. Now, Chris, you are same title. You share the title, and I think you share the job. So, Amanda, you've been at the Archdiocese for perhaps a year and a half, maybe
About 2.5 years.
2.5. Yeah. And Chris, you're fairly new at the Archdiocese.
Yeah, just a few months old.
But very experienced in the profession.
Yes.
You know, because we're talking about youth and young adults, I looked into the gospel yesterday to well, I think that our ministry to youth is getting them in touch with Jesus Christ. So I took a direct look to see what did Jesus do with the youth in the gospel, and how do youth appear? And I mentioned to Chris, I said, you know, he brought the children in and he said, you know, if you want to be in the kingdom of heaven, be like these. And there's other instances of Jesus.
Yeah, there's one more instance in the Gospel of John where in the feeding of the 5,000, it was a young boy that presented the loaves and the fish to the disciples. So again, it was a great story where the young people have a place to serve, and they could be the catalyst to that movement in the church.
And Jesus' interest in and love for the young was emphasized. It's 2 or 3 Gospels in which the story of that kind appears, and then also the story of the wealthy young man.
Yes.
And Jesus, and he was a good kid. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, he said, what must I do? And Jesus said, well, come follow me. And he had he was a wealthy young man. And so something about, he couldn't leave whatever his possessions or preoccupations were to deepen the relationship with Jesus. So you work with youth and young adult. What is the distinction or difference in those groups? Age?
Well, I would say for youth, we're looking at those ages 13 to 17, or 13 to 18 if they're still in high school.
Okay.
Then for young adults, we're looking at 18 to 39. So it's quite an age range with a lot of, especially for young adults, a lot of different things going on in that span of time between 18 and 39.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that you have all kinds of events and so on, but I think you also advise parishes about, so describe some of that to me, what that is.
Yeah, so I really see our role primarily at the Archdiocesan level as consultants. You know, we're going into parishes that don't have youth ministry or young adult ministry and are interested in trying to start that, and we're consulting with them and walking with them and trying to figure out how do we do this, or if they have it already, how do we grow this, you know? So yeah, I kind of see us as ministry consultants.
Okay. And the Archdiocese, there are, I think, close to 100 parishes, right? And do most of them have a youth program, or is it lacking in some places?
I would say about 50% have
Okay.
a youth program. Would you say 50%?
Yeah, about 50% for both
Yeah.
youth and young adult
Yeah.
combined.
Okay.
So some
Right,
parishes will have
combined.
both, but a lot of them will have one or the other. And our goal is to go into those parishes, and we've had parishes called into the office asking for youth ministry, asking for young adult ministry, which is awesome because that's where we need to grow the church.
Yeah.
Because as we've learned in the last year or so, we've gone to different conventions and conferences, and we've heard in one of the talks about disaffiliation of the leaving of the church. We're hearing them talking about 11, 12 years old, where they're making the decision right then and there to say, am I Christian? Am I Catholic? And that's where we see that, you know, young adult, youth, especially youth ministry, is becoming more and more important to our young people, because one thing that I see them use is social media to get what they want out of truth.
Okay.
You know, and I say to a lot of our youth ministers, especially the new ones, I say, you have to be faster than the internet. You know, I said that back in early 2000 to our young youth ministers, because
Sure.
that's exactly where our young people are looking for truth.
Sure.
Because they could find how to make a casserole, they could find a way to, you know, pitch a tent.
Right.
But of course, they want to find everything on there. So how are we as people making that face-to-face contact with them versus them just looking on a screen?
Yeah, there's something about, I use the internet myself. I'm a webmaster and a researcher and so on, and so it's great to have that. But you're not in community really with people. It's a different sort of
It's
relation.
kind of a superficial community.
It has a virtual aspect that's not genuine. So one of your challenges is to bring young people into physical contact, social contact, and so on.
I think community is the biggest factor right now, because since we're so connected on social media as a quote-unquote community,
Yeah.
that we forget that we have the face-to-face community right in front of us, right at the dinner table, right in our churches, right? That's what we're really trying to build in our... A lot of people think, wow, Chris, you're going a little backwards. You're trying to get them together. I go, well, that's what it's always been.
Okay.
And I think community is the basis of what we build in youth and young adult ministry, because that's what they're yearning for.
And real community, physical social presence with some, I don't know, meaningful endeavor, perhaps. I understand, I think, that prayer groups and Eucharistic adoration groups have an attraction for younger people.
Yeah,
Where else can they get that kind of thing except through you and through the church?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's far from few now,
Yeah.
because we're so connected. Even our families, even my parents are so connected
Yeah.
to their phone that we very rarely get to connect, even on a phone.
Right.
You know, to hear each other on the on the telephone itself, and hearing each other's voice, the inflection of our voices.
Yeah.
You know, that's why when I work with young people, especially in the confirmation process, if they miss a meeting with their parent or especially their sponsor, I tell them FaceTime them
FaceTime,
at least.
for sure, yeah.
Because then you get to see their facial expressions, their body language, and then we could connect in that level.
Hold that thought. We'll take a break now. We'll be back talking more in detail about youth and young adult ministry. Good, yeah. Hello, and we're talking with Amanda George and Chris Mariano, youth and young adult ministers in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, about this mission to the young people, and you are the exponents of that mission. Let me ask you some personal questions, how you got into that. You both have professional training, professional experience, but something brought you into ministry as your vocation. How about you?
Yeah, so, you know, I have a business background and a tech background, but when I came back to my faith, I really wanted to help other young people because I felt like I didn't hear the message of Catholicism, the truths of Catholicism in a compelling way when I was young, which kind of gave me no reason then to stay in my 20s. So I thought, maybe I can help this next generation. Maybe I can be part of helping them hear the truth, before they're gone.
So it sounds like you were raised Catholic.
Oh yeah.
And baptized as a baby, raised Catholic, but then you had the typical feeling at 20 that something was missing or it wasn't taking root and so on.
Yeah, it just wasn't compelling, at the time. I didn't really see a reason to make it a priority in my life.
Right.
And so I really wanted, but I really regret that.
Sure.
I really wish that I had heard the message in a more compelling way when I was young. So I really wanted to be part of trying to make that a reality for other young people. So.
And Chris, you grew up Catholic here.
Yes.
And ever any doubts about it? Did you leave the faith at some time?
Well, I did have a moment in my life where I wasn't going to church for 2 years of my life, but before that, when I was very young, around 7 years old, I had a moment where I went to a mass that was a healing mass, and where I was actually healed from a sickness or a skin condition, basically eczema, if you know what eczema is.
Sure, yeah.
And it went away in 2 days without any medication, anything, and I just knew that if God gave me something like that, why can't I give back? And ever since then, I started my ministry at being an altar server, was in the choirs when I was younger. I was a choir director when I was 13 years old with high schoolers.
Oh, you're a musician, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I did all that, and then even with all that happening in my life, there were still 2 years of my young adult life where I didn't see eye to eye with either the church or where my life was going.
Sure.
And eventually, I made amends, and I got into church because my pastor, picking him up to come to my house for my dad's birthday party, asked me, "Do you want to be a youth minister?" And I was like, "I'll think about it." And after that, then really since '99, that's where the journey of youth ministry came about.
Yeah.
Was just someone asking me.
And prior to the ministry, you had professional experience, I think, in retail.
Right. I was in retail. I'm actually a chef, certified chef.
What don't you do? Yeah.
So I worked for Williams-Sonoma, some big stores. So I used both the retail and the food industry, but I really used the service industry as a big basis of my ministry. Is that I serve people instead of now feeding their bodies, now I'm feeding their souls.
You learn those skills and habits, and you're a web developer, tech advisor, and so on. So professional skills, I'm harping on that because I think it helps you relate to the young adults. Is that right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
San Francisco Bay Area is the mecca for young techies, right? Even though they can't afford to rent an apartment here. So this must be a target audience of yours or a ministry of yours. You can talk to these people, yeah?
Yeah, I think it really helps to be able to accompany people, to be able to walk with them where they are, to understand being away from the church, why they might have left, what might be kind of stopping them from coming back, and to really be able to walk with somebody where they are. I think that our life experience really facilitates that well.
Yeah, I had a great experience at Teresa of Avila, just on 19th Street.
Parish
at the
church.
parish church,
Yeah.
yes. And they had an adoration with the young adults. And I got to meet with them, and they were all from the Mission Bay, kind of the upbringing of that whole community of UCSF and all the companies there. And they're just great young adults that want to be in their faith. And they were there at adoration for the whole hour. They were in it together. They were just praying together. And it was just a nice time to just be together.
Now, Catholics watching the show will understand what you mean by adoration.
Oh, right.
It's silent prayer in the church before the Eucharist in the tabernacle or displayed somehow. So I want to ask you this important question. Was everybody's mobile device off for the whole hour or whatever the time was?
Yes, it was. It was all off.
Do you collect them at the door?
No, they're a very self-regulating young adult group. And I see that with a lot of young adult groups. They will take care of their own, which is really very different from young adult ministry, of course.
From youth
ministry,
I'm sorry, youth ministry,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But, yeah.
Yes, working with mature people who have a mature seeking for something of spiritual depth and who have the capability of learning it. I mean, it must be important in your work to realize, I don't know, neurological science and physiological science say, well, the 18-year-old brain can do this, the 28-year-old brain can do that. So you're up to date on all that stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the science and the understanding of like when the brain finishes maturing today is way more advanced than it used to be, right? We understand now that the human brain doesn't finish maturing until it's 25, right?
Okay.
So, so at 18, there's still 7 more years of development, judgment, all of those things that are coming together and forming, and but it's also a really interesting time, those early 20s, because you're still at a point where your willingness to make big risks is there, but you also have more judgment than you used to than you did as a 16-year-old,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting time of life. Yeah.
And I think that's where our roles are so important, because we're still molding and developing and helping them understand where is their truth.
Yeah.
Where is the truth?
Good.
Because I think being part of that development, part of that stage in their life is so key as a church.
Wonderful.
And we have to keep reminding ourselves to welcome them into our parishes.
Amen. So let's take a little break again, and we'll come back for our third segment and discuss in detail something about youth ministry. That'd be fun. Hello, we're talking about youth ministry. Our guests are Amanda George and Chris Mariano, colleagues who work at the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And it's in the news, it's well-known, secular news and church news, that young people are leaving the church. Not just young people, but the number who profess that they're Catholic has dropped when they do the standard surveys, Pew Survey and so on. So there's a name for people that mark none on their religious affiliation on the survey.
Right.
And you must deal with these people. You know who they are, right?
Yeah,
And that must be a challenging situation to look at.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends that I grew up with Catholic are now nuns, you know, N-O-N-E-S.
N-O-N-E-S.
And they don't go to church, they don't consider themselves Catholic, you know. And we know from statistics, from studies, that then, you know, the main reason that young people are leaving the church is some of the harder teachings of the church. But I think it's not something that can't be overcome. We can overcome that. What we need to do is be training ourselves, our youth ministers, our young adult leaders, to be more comfortable talking about the teachings of the church in a loving way, right? It always has to be with love. So if we can really speak the truth in a compelling way with love, I think that we can work on that. Yeah.
And there's a large demographic of intellectually adept people. I mean, everybody has a college degree now.
Yeah.
And I think you can make intellectual arguments. Now, for instance, Bishop Barron has his videos ministry. Are there others that are specifically directed at youth and young adults?
Definitely on Ascension Press, Father Mike Schmidt. He has a ton of videos directed to young adults and youth. I actually use them in the classroom to bring up these conversations now, especially with our middle schoolers.
Really?
You know, so then we could actually have these conversations now. And I think that's a big part of it is I think the catechesis, how compassionate, not only compassionate, but passionate we are.
That's
about,
good, yeah.
About both the teaching, but also how do we share with our young people the truth, and can we walk them through the process? Because I know every year when I go into a classroom, I said, my first statement is, you might not like what I'm going to say today.
Yes. And I think that, you know, an amateurish view of what religion or morality is telling you things you're not supposed to do, making you behave in a certain way. But I think the better approach is the richness and intellectual beauty and spiritual depth of the teachings. And You've got to
Yeah.
present that, right? People will respond.
Yeah, and a lot of the young people perceive incorrectly that there are conflicts between faith and science,
Oh, yes, right.
Between religion and
That's
science.
a handy one.
And
Yeah.
so you have people like Father Robert Spitzer who are trying to address that particular
Sure.
issue that people have with his Magis Center for Faith and Reason.
Sure.
That really, he's quite the scientist,
Right.
and can go into so many of these things that
Yes.
people think are contradictions.
I like that a lot. Now, about youth ministry, teenage stuff, you wanted to tell us about some upcoming events that are coming this fall.
Well-
and you have another, well, tell me about what's happening.
Well, one thing that we have actually coming up this weekend is Steubenville NorCal. So that's going to be a gathering of about 1,000 young people, high schoolers, that are going to come from all over Northern California, some from Oregon, Hawaii, things like that. And we're going to have praise and worship, mass, talks from national speakers who, like I was talking about, hearing the message in a compelling way. These people are so good, so amazing to listen to. So I'm just so excited for all the teens that are going to experience that this weekend.
That sounds good. This is University of Steubenville Franciscan.
It's a partnership between Franciscan University of Steubenville
Yeah.
and Life Teen.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds
Yeah.
good. And Chris, what's up? Something on the young adults menu coming up?
Young adults coming up on October 5th, we have a harvest ball. And that's going to be up in Tiburon, over at St. Hilary's. So that's another great gathering for young adults to not only just come together in faith, but definitely come together in community and just have a night of being together.
Yeah.
And it's one of our annual events. It's our third annual, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity for them to come together.
And social dancing is involved?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, even a lesson.
A lesson too. That you need that to get the guys out on the floor.
Right.
And then there are other things. There's theology on tap. Isn't that where you sit in a nice bar and have a beer?
We
and
haven't started that yet here,
Yeah.
but it's on our menu. Things that we want to consider and try to get going here. Yeah.
Yeah. And where can, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have a couple youth events as well coming up.
Okay.
September 7th, we have at St. Augustine Parish, we're teaching our young adults and youth liturgical ministry. So
Okay.
any Eucharistic extraordinary ministers of the Holy Communion, lectors, cantors or choirs, and also altar servers. So if they want to learn for their parishes or even the schools, which we have some schools already signed up to go,
Excellent.
they can learn those services. And then the other one is on October 20th over at St. Teresa of Avila Parish again in San Francisco. And that will be a youth rally.
Okay,
So
good.
we'll have praise and worship, mass, and also a speaker for that day as well.
And I think we're about out of time. I want to thank you for being here and talking about youth ministry. And you can always consult the website, the youth ministry and young adult ministry webpage, full of resources on the Archdiocesan webpage. Thank you.